Hello everybody. So in this video I just wanted to do a brief walkthrough of the code for a recent project I did and then show some of the project actually working. If you want to look a little more in depth at the code, you can go to my GitHub repo right here and you can see all of the details you want to see. Otherwise, let's just jump into it. So we have our blockchain folder here. We're in the block.js file, and this is a constructor that sets the standard data fields for every block. So we have our timestamp, the hash of the last block, the hash of the current block, the data of the current block, the nonce, and the mining difficulty. And this is our toString method that just returns the contents of that block. And here we have our Genesis function, which just creates the very first block. You can see our timestamp is Genesis time. Our last hash is left blank because there was no last block. This is our first hash, empty data field, 0 nonce, and our standard difficulty, which is a constant that's defined in another folder or another file. And then we have our mining function. I'm not going to get into too much detail about it because it would be too long of a video. And you can go and check it out on your own if you would like. Then we have our block.test.js, which just is a bunch of unit tests to make sure that this is working properly. And in our index.js, we have our actual blockchain. This is our constructor. It automatically loads in the Genesis block that I talked about in the last file. This is our add block function for when a block is mined and we add a new block to the blockchain. This function makes sure that a chain is valid. We actually call this function in here when two different chains are being compared to find out which one is the ultimate source of truth. This makes sure that the chain that we're looking at is valid. If it's not valid, then we're going to reject it and return out of the function. Also, if the chain that we're looking at is the same length as our current chain, then we're just going to not do anything because the chains are identical. Otherwise, we have a new chain that is valid, and we're going to replace the current chain with that one. And again, we have a bunch of unit tests to make sure that that works properly. Now moving on to the wallet. So every client that runs this program gets their own wallet. So here we just have our initial balance, which I set to 500. We have our key pair, which is used here to generate a unique signature for transactions. And then we have our public key, which is encoded in hexadecimal form. Our toString method will return the contents of each wallet. And we have our create transaction, our calculate balance. This uses all of the data from the blockchain to, well, it actually uses the data from our wallet that was on the blockchain to calculate our balance. There's a bunch of stuff in here to prevent double spending and all that. And yes. Here we have our test to make sure that all works properly. And then we have our transaction pool. So this generally is making sure transactions are valid, making sure people aren't trying to spend more than they have. And then once it is valid, we are adding each transaction as it comes in, we're adding it to the transaction pool. Bunch of unit tests. And then we have our transaction.js file, and in here we're just doing more validation stuff, making sure people aren't spending more than they have, and returning some data after transactions. And then this is code for our reward transaction. This is where miners get rewarded. So you see we have a mining reward constant here. I think it's set to 50. So when a miner mines a transaction, they'll get 50 of their own cryptocurrency that will just go to their wallet. We have our signed transactions, verify a transaction. And a bunch of unit tests to make sure all that works properly. I'll run the tests pretty soon. Let me just finish this. So our index.js in our app folder, this basically makes everything interactable so we can go to our Postman application and actually run these commands, which I will do shortly. And then this is our miner.js folder. This just handles the functionality for mining a transaction and adding the new block. And then our P2P server.js handles the connection between each client. So here we have our function to connect to peers, our listen for socket connections, our constructor takes in the blockchain and the transaction pool so that all the clients are up to date. And yeah, we have broadcast transactions, make sure that each transaction is sent to every client, so every client is up to date. And then this broadcast clear transactions. This is when a miner is mining transactions. Once a transaction is mined, it's cleared from the transaction pool because it's no longer an outstanding transaction. It is now verified and it becomes its own block. So demonstrate that once I get into the Postman app. But for now, let's run a test. Let me see. So I just do an npm run test, and we're waiting. It might take a little while because it's doing actual transactions and So we have 31 passed out of 31. That's 100%. So everything works as needed. Sorry about that. So now let's go over to the Postman app, and you'll see here I have 3 clients connected to the blockchain. Nothing has been done yet. It's just a new blockchain. All it has is a Genesis block. So let's go and make sure that we have our Genesis blocks and everyone agrees that that's all there is. So 3001 agrees, 3002, same thing, and 3003, same thing. So all of our clients are in agreement with the current state of the blockchain. Now if we go and we'll do a transaction, so we'll have 3001 let's get their public key. So this is the public key for the 3001 client's wallet. Now I do 3002 transact, and then we will send some currency to our first client's wallet, and we'll send 100. This is a post method. And here we have the outputs of the transaction and the inputs. So we started off with 500. This is the timestamp of the transaction, the address of the transaction. Or actually that might be, I think that's our 3002 client's wallet address. Yes. And then we have our outputs. This is how much we have now in our current wallet. This is how much we sent to this client. So let's go back to 3001 and let's get, actually, before we do that, let's look at transactions. So this is going to show us the transaction pool, and this is the same one we were just looking at. And then let's say 3003 wants to mine the transaction. Then it has mined it, and its reward is 50, and that was sent to its wallet address. And this is the nonce value and the difficulty. So now we can go to blocks, and we have our Genesis block, our first transaction, and our reward transaction for the miner. So we see that 3001 has the same blocks in it, 3002, same, 3003, same, and we can also see in these terminals that we have some replacing blockchain with a new chain. So this is our first client. After our third client here mined the transaction, created a new block, our other two clients had to update their chains with the new block. We can also just mine, which creates new blocks out of thin air. That's a post method. So here's our new block. And we can do it again. Our new block. We can do it again. And our new block. And you can see that the difficulty is changing each time. I do have a function in the code that, let me see if I can find it. Right here, adjust difficulty. So it makes sure that the difficulty stays relatively constant so that it's not becoming too easy to mine and it's not becoming too difficult to mine. And that's another reason why when I ran the tests, it took a little while for it to finish all of it, because mining was one of the tests in there. So yeah, that's pretty much all of the functionality of this blockchain. You can see here our mined blocks, new block added. And there we go. So like I said, if you're interested in seeing more of the code, you can go ahead and go to github.com/aglawson/blockchain from scratch and go ahead and check it out. One thing to note is that you'll see here there's no node modules folder, but in here there is a node modules folder, and it's because if I were to upload this to GitHub, it would take hours to upload probably. So all you have to do is when you download this, you just go to your command line and run npm install, and then that'll load in all of your node modules. And it doesn't take that long. So that's pretty much it. Thank you for checking this out. Hope you guys thought this was an interesting project. Feel free to go to the GitHub, look for any problems with the code, let me know if you find any problems or improvements, and that would be greatly appreciated.